Note: the following video depicts a specific configuration of the notebook. The same removal and replacement procedures apply to all configurations of the notebook. Before you begin, remove the battery, optical drive, if installed, service cover, wireless module, keyboard, and top cover. Removal. Important: make careful note of the routing of the wireless antenna, power connector, and display panel cables for later replacement. Using minimal force, lift the locking bar up on the optical drive ZIF connector and disconnect the optical drive connector ribbon cable from the system board. Caution: use care to prevent damaging the ZIF connector and ribbon cable. Remove the wireless antenna cables from the cutout in the base enclosure. Remove the wireless antenna cables from the routing channel on the base enclosure. Disconnect the display panel cable from its connector on the system board, and remove the display panel cable from the routing channel that secures it to the base enclosure. Important: if the notebook is equipped with a touchscreen, disconnect the touchscreen cable from its connector on the system board. Remove the 5.5mm and 3mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the power connector bracket to the base enclosure. Remove the power connector bracket from the base enclosure. Remove the power connector from its cradle on the base enclosure. While supporting the display panel assembly, remove the two 5.5mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the left display panel hinge to the base enclosure. Remove the two 5.5mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the right display panel hinge to the base enclosure. Remove the 3mm P1 Phillips broadhead screw that secures the right display panel hinge to the base enclosure. Carefully lift the display panel assembly off of its alignment pins on the base enclosure and remove. Replacement. Align the display panel hinges over the screw holes and alignment pins on the base enclosure, and lower the display panel assembly into position. Important: ensure that the wireless antenna, power connector, and display panel cables are free from being pinched between the display panel assembly and base enclosure. While supporting the display panel assembly, replace the 3mm P1 Phillips broadhead screw that secures the right display panel hinge to the base enclosure. Replace the two 5.5mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the right display panel hinge to the base enclosure. Replace the two 5.5mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the left display panel hinge to the base enclosure. Place the power connector into its cradle on the base enclosure. Place the power connector bracket into position on the power connector. Replace the 5.5mm and 3mm P1 Phillips head screws that secure the power connector bracket to the base enclosure. Connect the display panel cable onto its connector on the system board and route the display panel cable through the routing channel that secures it to the system board. Important: if the notebook is equipped with a touchscreen, connect the touchscreen cable into its connector on the system board. Route the wireless antenna cables through the routing channel on the base enclosure. Guide the wireless antenna cables through the cutout in the base enclosure. Route the power connector cable through the routing channel on the base enclosure. Insert the optical drive connector ribbon cable into the optical drive ZIF connector on the system board and press the locking bar down to lock the cable into place. Caution: use care to prevent damaging the ZIF connector and ribbon cable.